Hello student, welcome back. In this session, we are going to understand monsoon and the relation between the climate change and monsoon. You must have already studied about the monsoon and all the important factors that influences the monsoon. Here, in the last 1.5 year, monsoon and climate change have been in the news many number of times, and we are expecting this year this question can be framed. If you look into the current affair context, then recently the Indian Express had expressed how India's monsoon is rain pattern has been changing amid the climate change. And not just once, many times this question had appeared. And we are trying to relate the present current affair context with the previous year's mains questions, wherein UPSC have asked questions on the climate change and different aspects, like for example the climate change and the forest resource, the water resource. So we are expecting the climate change and the Indian climate can also be related. In the past, what type of the questions have been asked here with respect to the Indian climate, the southwest monsoon wind being called as the Purvaya, and how does this influences the cultural ethos of the region? The characteristic of the monsoon have been asked. Okay. And monsoon and the variation in the monsoon because of humanizing landscape have been asked. The regional distribution of the monsoon, those were the questions in the past. Also, the question on monsoon and the El Nino and the La Nina were asked, and it was the El Nino year going on in 2014. The question was with respect to the El Nino and its impact upon the climate on that of the India 2014. Similarly, when it was El Nino year, it was basically the drought year, and in 2014, drought related question was asked in disaster management in GS paper 3. So, and this year it is La Nina which is going on, so you may expect question accordingly. Here, with respect to the climate change and the monsoon, we are trying to understand that the climate change from the various dimensions have been asked previously. That is, the consequences of the climate change on food security, impact of climate change on the water resources, the forest resources, and its resulting impact on the climate change. So we are trying to relate monsoon and climate change, and accordingly, we are trying to study this topic. So I hope you have understood the crux of the topic. Now we are going to understand what are the causes of this climate change in the context of monsoon. Climate change is a bigger phenomenon. We are limiting this from the perspective of the monsoon only. We'll try to understand what will be the impact and what could be the mitigation measures, and ultimately we'll draw the conclusion. So in the recent context, try to understand that if you're writing answer for such type of the questions, many students will be starting with what is the Indian monsoon. So they may say that Indian monsoon is basically a secondary or periodic wind with a seasonal reversion in the wind direction. This is a very static introduction. You can enhance this by giving the current affair context. For example, the CEEW, which is the Council on the Energy and Environment and Water. Council on Energy, Environment and Water. This is basically an international think tank which came up with a research study decoding India's changing monsoon pattern. Wherein in this study they had said that the monsoon pattern have been fast shifting and it has become more and more erratic. That is, at times it is very high rainfall, very low rainfall at times in the past 1 decade, and this is the result of faster rate at which the climate is changing. So climate change is directly being linked to the impact on the monsoon, and here this study we can quote in our introduction itself. This will give us a little edge in our answer. With respect to the mains body, we need to first understand the causes of variability in the Indian monsoon. We need to mention one important dimension, impact of or the effect of the climate change on the monsoon, and then we will be looking into the measures or the way forward, and ultimately the conclusion. So in this way we can have this multi-dimensional answer. UPSC may ask a general question or the impact of climate change on the monsoon, or it may be like tilted towards any of the dimensions. So you will have substantial content to write any of the answer related to this topic. So with respect to this variability in monsoon, what are the important factors that causes variability? Variations may be either increasing the precipitation, reducing it in terms of amount and in terms of time. Okay, temporal or spatial variation is because of many factors. One factor is El Nino and La Nina. So you must be knowing that El Nino is the phenomena happening in the south of the Pacific Oceans. La Nina is also the phenomena in the same region, wherein El Nino is responsible for weak monsoon in the case of the India, and La Nina is responsible for relatively stronger monsoon. Until last year, it was El Nino year going on. The El Nino effect is neutralized, and in the current affair, La Nina is very much in the news, saying that this year it is going to be the La Nina. It means it is going to be relatively higher amount of the precipitation, and the consequences of that could be flood. So you can expect a question here also, La Nina and its impact on the monsoon, and you may expect a question related to flood in the disaster management GS paper 3 or GS paper 1 also. We'll tackle those topics individually. Monsoon is affected by the warming of the East Indian Oceans. Okay, greater the warming, greater is the rate of convection, and what is the amount of precipitation. So warming of the sea surface is relatively very important. Then Indian Ocean Dipole, I hope you know, way back in 2017 it was there in the news and it was a prelims question also. So dipole and the Indian Ocean. So what are these two dipoles? These two poles are Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal. So its alternate warming and cooling have some positive and negative influence on the monsoon. And in the recent years, because of the climate change, this is fluctuating to a greater extent, thereby fluctuating the Indian monsoon. Then subtropical jet streams. This is very important. You must have studied the important jet streams over that of the India that influences the monsoon. So there are basically three jet streams. One is the subtropical jet streams, another one is the Somali jet streams, and the last is the tropical easterly jet streams, also known as the African jet stream. Here in this context, subtropical jet streams have a relatively negative influence because it is responsible for high pressure atmospheric system over the Indian subcontinent. So when the subtropical jet stream is present, it is bad for the monsoon. When the subtropical jet stream shifts to the north of that of the Himalaya, low pressure is developed over India and monsoon is pulled. Okay. So in this context, climate change is also affecting the position of the subtropical jet streams, and that is causing variability in the monsoon. The frequent shifting of the subtropical jet streams is causing frequent breaks in the monsoon. And this breaks, when it is for a longer time, it may lead to drought-like condition. Then Somali jet stream, which is blowing between the Somalia and that of this masculine, these jet streams also have positive influence. So if the Somali jet streams become weak enough, it is going to have a weak influence upon the monsoon. Also the tropical easterly jet stream have a positive influence. The climate change is affecting the tropical easterly jet streams also, thereby weakening the monsoon. Then pre-monsoon heating of that of the Himalayan region. So because of that, what happens is the pre-monsoon heating causes convective rainfall, and that may lead to the development of the higher pressure, and high pressure is going to be acting negative in the sense of monsoon. The Himalayan glaciers melting because of the global warming, that also have impact, because glaciers are very important. Okay, important in influencing the climate of the region. Okay, in context of this, there was one mains question asked, what is the impact of the cryosphere? The impact of this cryosphere upon that of the climate. So cryosphere is basically those regions which is having snow or the snowfall or the ice cover. So it could be the glaciers, it could be the frozen sea, Okay, or it could be the frozen lakes, okay, icebergs. These are basically the cryosphere and have impact upon that of the climate. So if cryos, that is if the glaciers are melting, definitely it will have the impact upon the climate. In that context, in the case of the India, if the Himalayan glaciers are melting, definitely it will have impact upon the climate of the India, and monsoon would definitely be impacted. The intertropical convergence zone, which is also known as the thermal equator, also known as the monsoon trough or the equatorial trough. This is very, very important because this monsoon trough, this is a low pressure belt region which is going to pull the monsoon. So if the intertropical convergence zone is not sufficiently or strongly developed, strong low pressure is not going to be developed, and it may lead to weaker monsoon. And also the weakening of the low pressure system over the Tibet. So Tibet, everyone knows the significance of Tibet with respect to the monsoon. When the Tibet is sufficiently hot enough, it is going to develop low pressure, and that will pull the monsoon. Weakening of this low pressure over that of the Tibet, okay, may lead to weak monsoon. So these are some important factors that influences the monsoon. Climate change is influencing these factors, which in turn is going to impact the monsoon. What will be the impact of or the effect of that of the climate change? So it may lead to either excessive rainfall or it may lead to deficit rainfall, causing flood and drought-like condition. So IMD, Indian Meteorological Department, have clearly cited that 2022 was the most extreme years, extreme climatical condition, that is very high and very low rainfall was observed, and this was observed after 120 years. Earlier, last it was seen in 1902. Research also shows that the global warming have increased the fluctuations in the monsoon. It is not saying that only high rainfall will be there or only low rainfall. Fluctuation, both high and low is seen. At times there is a long period of dry, and at times there is a short period of very heavy rainfall. So short period of heavy rainfall will lead to flood, and long period of dry is going to lead to drought-like condition. So here try to understand that by this example, 2019 drought took place in several parts of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and Andhra. Previously in 2018 there was flood in the Kerala. 2014 to 16 was drought in the successive 2 years drought in the Bundelkhand region. Prior to that it was flood in the Kashmir. Prior to that it was drought in the parts of Maharashtra, Karnataka and Gujarat. So can you see consecutively every year you get to see drought, then flood, then drought, then flood, then drought, then flood. So it may, and the frequency of this is almost every alternate year. So the frequency of extreme climatical condition have increased, and this is because of climate change. It is also experienced that the albedo effect is increasing. Albedo is basically the reflected sunlight, and this effect is increasing. So it means if more sunlight is being reflected, it is going to have a negative impact upon the surface heating. Yes. So consider the sunlight, and the sunlight is being reflected from, let us say, the surface of the cloud itself. The sunlight, sufficient sunlight is not reaching the surface. Okay. So in that context, sunlight is also being reflected from the dust particles, aerosols. So if there is a strong convection, then what would happen is aerosols development will take place. Sunlight will be reflected. In that context, the surface will not be heating up because sunlight will not be reaching the surface. Surface will not become strongly hot enough. In that context, what impact will it have? That in this case, try to understand that it will lead to cooling of the land. Okay, when it is not sufficiently hot enough, it will lead to the cooling of the land. When the land becomes cool enough, and also you consider the ocean is having water having very high specific heat, so it do not become warm enough anyways. So when this is also sufficiently cool, then the thermal contrast between the ocean and the continent would decrease. When the thermal contrast will decrease, then pressure gradient force is going to decrease. In that context, what will happen is sufficient moisture will not be pulled from the ocean towards the continent side. In that context, monsoon is going to become weak enough. Okay, I hope you are understanding the technicalities. That cooling of this land, the thermal contrast or the temperature contrast, okay, between the sea and the land is going to reduce, is going to weaken, and this is going to weaken the atmospheric circulation system. Monsoon is going to become weak enough. Then there will be regional variation in the precipitation. Some regions like Western Ghat and the Indo-Gangetic plains, the data shows that these regions should used to receive sufficiently high amount of rainfall, but have reduced in this last few decades. Okay. Simultaneously, some region is receiving very heavy rainfall, very low rainfall. So there is an increased precipitation in some region, there is a decreased precipitation in some. So variations in terms of region, that is spartal distribution, spartal variation, and temporal. At times monsoon is delayed and early departure. So overall duration of monsoon is less. At time quantity of the rainfall is less. So temporal and spartal distribution is seeing some variation. We're done to tackle this issue. One, see, the major issue of variation in the monsoon was climate change, and climate change is happening because of the global warming. So we need to understand that if we tackle the global warming, climate change can be mitigated and variability in monsoon can be reduced. So it can be done by adopting or developing low carbon energy. So energy production can be done with the help of renewable source of energy like solar, wind, hydro, tidal, etc. There is also non-renewable source of energy like nuclear. It can also be promoted as these are environment friendly. So along with the reducing the global warming, it will also help to mitigate the impact of global warming. Okay, so it will solve two problems. One is India, which is an energy deficit country, that will be resolved, plus the global warming can be resolved. Then promoting the energy efficient technology. Energy efficient technology, so those technology which is consuming the energy, let us say for example home appliances, buildings, or the industrial machineries or the vehicles. Okay, they should be developed which can increase the efficiency of that of the energy. In this case, the consumption of the energy and production of the energy both needs to be emphasized. Okay, reducing green energy and increasing the efficiency of the existing consuming technologies. Carbon sequestration, that is afforestation, that is storing the carbon from that of the atmosphere through the process of the photosynthesis. This can be done with the help of forest because forest act as a rain magnet. So dual problem can be resolved here also. Afforestation will help in reducing the carbon from the atmosphere. Also, it will act as a rain magnet. So it can have two solutions. Not only that, the forest will also prevent the soil erosion. It will also help in recharging the groundwater, provide habitat for the birds, animals, etc. And the entire ecosystem can be conserved in that way. Also changing the cropping pattern. Crops like paddy, which releases methane, is one of the major contributor of greenhouse gas. So if we change the consumption pattern more towards that of this millet is not only environment friendly, it not only help in reducing the greenhouse gas emission, but it is also beneficial for the human health and the farmers. Technological interventions has to be done, that is better weather forecasting system, GIS technology should be adopted for better weather forecasting so that we are well prepared with respect to the variability of the monsoon. And ultimately, since the present reason for the variability of the monsoon is last 150 years of the greenhouse gas emission. So there can be two solutions. One is a short-term solution, one is a longer term. The short-term solution is that since climate change is not a sudden phenomenon, it takes several years and decades. So the short-term solution is to mitigate the climate change. Preparedness should be done. So the disaster preparedness should be very well done in advance. Second thing is, for a long-term solution, we need to adapt the energy efficient technology and green energy. In this way, the variability of the monsoon and the climate world over can be reduced. So I hope you were able to understand the monsoon and the climate change relation, and you may enrich this by adding some more examples, some more data. Okay, and thereby this content can be utilized directly in your exam. Thank you, student.